In the highest stakes match of the group stage yet, T1 and EDG faced off to determine who would take first and second seed of Group A. This draft was also super interesting by both teams because not only did we see the expression of the newest meta at the highest level, but we also got to see a different take on styles that teams go for, and I'd say an increased amount of risk taking as well. I think it's a super interesting chance for us to take a look at how teams perceive identities of these champions and how they get rewarded for correct reads on the meta. As always, if you enjoyed content like this, feel free to drop a sub to support the channel. Let's hop in the draft. Starting with the first phase bans, we see many of the power picks in this meta removed as per usual. EDG get rid of Azir, Aatrox, and actually Poppy, while T1 remove Caitlyn, Yuumi, and Fiora. It's possible that EDG wants to play a jungler like Lee Sin or J4 that Poppy destroys, so it's reasonable that they get rid of it. T1 get rid of Fiora potentially in response, and because they technically have a spare ban here. Sejuani and Maokai are both up at this point in the draft, and it does not make sense for them to only ban one of them, since the other will just get instantly picked by EDG for the B1. As expected, out of the bans, EDG grabbed Maokai as their opener. For a bit of a change of pace, T1 actually opened Kalista. It's been quoted as a very strong and potentially oppressive pick in bot lane right now, but similar to Caitlyn, we've been seeing very mixed results with it. Most of its strength comes within its laning phase prowess, so it's a bit of a leap of faith here to push the draft in this direction. This also opens options for EDG to respond with later on in the draft, like a Lucian Nami pairing now in the B2-B3, or something like a Draven in B4-B5. T1 also paired the Kalista off with Sejuani. In response, EDG go for a more standard take in the Aphelios Thresh combo. A relatively safe move and not one that garners a lot of advantage for EDG, but if there's any slot to take this pairing in, it would be this one. To round out the first phase of draft, T1 take the Victor for Faker, and then immediately use their first ban on Akali to shield this pick. EDG opt to use their bans on some of the most annoying support pairings in phase 2, as it's the highest percentage role to target in this case. Renata and Pyke are the champions removed in this case. T1 also banned Viego, as it's probably the highest agency jungler that can cause problems for this T1 team. With the 3 champions they have so far and a mid slot to worry about, having a champion like Viego would help solve some of the damage issues for EDG. For R4, T1 actually swing for the Soraka counterpick into the Aphelios Thresh here. I think this is an example of T1's very unique interpretation of Kalista in draft, as well as making use of Soraka to basically force the hand of EDG. To be honest, I don't think this matchup is that good for Soraka normally, and T1 is mainly relying on Kalista's early game pressure in order to carry her through to the later phases. This pick also shifts Kalista's champion identity to something more backwards to note, but Soraka's identity in draft can spell checkmate for certain teams if it goes unpunished. This is because many teams are abandoning the ability to build forward comps in favor of just playing a safe front to back. However, when you have confirms that the enemy team wants to go for this front to back, this is when Soraka shoots up heavily in viability. In normal front to back scenarios, Soraka is actually just a Thanos pick in this case because her raw healing output can stat check many teams by herself. That means a common outcome is that teams are forced to draft around her and actually play to die for her in backline. But a lot of teams don't give themselves enough slots remaining to play around it, or they just choose not to, which is insanely disrespectful of this pick. EDG try a bit to salvage this scenario in their B4-B5 by opting to a bit more lockdown in the mid lane with Lissandra. They also attempt to increase their damage output with Graves. Although EDG need both damage and forward lockdown in this case, they could have benefited from something like a Vi or Lee Sin in this case. EDG should know that they pretty much have to dissect this Soraka in fights, so I would have liked to see more aggression in this B4-B5 to pivot towards that. To round off, T1 draft something that can both do tank shred and work well into T1's mid pick in the GP, which is extremely smart here. This solves every need they have in terms of lane assignments and safety, while also addressing the teamfight needs of T1's comp perfectly. Now in fights, it'll be extremely difficult for EDG to reach T1's priority targets easily thanks to how GP functions in fights. Overall, in the first phase of draft, I was relatively scared for T1 to execute with such a delicate champion like Kalista, but with a few smart picks in the R3 to R5 especially, they crafted a comp that punishes teams like EDG that refuse to innovate and experiment with their picks and styles. EDG have strong picks for sure, but these picks are more so in a vacuum and not picks with context. Because of this context, I think this draft gives a lot of room for T1 to succeed in both the early and late, and because of this, I rate the draft 65-35 for T1. As always though, hope this analysis was insightful to you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay fresh.